I wanted to go ahead and just answer a couple of questions I've been getting about audiobooks lately, because the audiobook industry is in upheaval and it's kind of amazing to watch. So we know that audiobooks have been growing year over year for the past several years. The industry is becoming very profitable. We are seeing a lot of our sales start to come from audiobooks. But audiobooks have been pretty costly to make. You're paying for narrators, and depending on if you're doing that yourself and narrating your own book, or if you're paying for a narrator, it can cost anywhere from hundreds to thousands of dollars. So the audiobook market hasn't been as saturated, which is one reason why authors are doing so well here, because if you take the investment and do put your books in audiobook, especially if your demographic tends to listen to audio more, people are seeing a lot of sales there. And so everyone wants a cut of this. We've been seeing this most recently. Spotify bought Findaway Voices, and they own Findaway Voices, which means Findaway Voices still has all of the distribution that we've seen in the past, going out to Kobo, going out to iBooks, going out to Audible. But now those books on Findaway Voices are also showing up on Spotify. And the value here is that Spotify has so many listeners already on their platform that like to take their content and listen to it, whether it be podcasts or music. They have this base of listeners that may not even be readers. So what they're trying to do is not necessarily steal the audiobook market from established platforms like Audible or iBooks, but what they're trying to do is to convert their current audience of listeners into audiobook users. So in essence, yeah, it could take part of the market, but it's also going to open up a new market or a new opportunity. And the idea is to bring in new clients and customers who will convert to audiobooks. So this has been happening. It's been underway for several months. But what's happened more recently is Spotify has tried to release an update to their app for Apple that allows consumers to buy direct from Spotify on the app. So if I'm browsing around, I find an audiobook I want to listen to on Spotify, I could just buy it right in the app. Apple has refused this update. They will not allow in-app purchases for Spotify for audiobooks on the app on Apple devices. Now, of course, Apple says this is because it's against some terms and agreements, but they've essentially said, nope. So if I, as a Spotify user, want to buy an audiobook, what happens? I find the audiobook, I click on it, and it says, unfortunately, you can't get your audiobook right here. You have to go online and make the purchase, which is inconvenient. And we know that the more clicks that someone has to make to get to the end sale, the less likely they are to buy the product, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of, hey, we've got people on the Spotify app already using it. Let's make it easy and convenient for them to go ahead and get audiobooks. So that's kind of in the works right now, where Spotify is trying to make ground and Apple is kind of pushing back on them. Now, very shortly after this happened, Apple has released the first books on their platform with AI generated narration. They just put this out. They kind of held back because of some of the tech stuff that was happening. They very quietly put this up, and it's just now making a splash this week, even though it's been on our radar for the past, I think, 3 weeks. So they have released these audiobooks with AI narration. There are 2 currently narrators. There is a female voice by the name of Madison, and Madison focuses on romance is mostly what the books that they've done so far. So we're looking at romance books and also some other fiction. And then there's a male voice by the name of Jackson, and Jackson is doing kind of more of the male roles. Now, this is very limited. Essentially, what happened is Apple contacted some publishers, many indies, who were doing well in sales, and under strict NDA, a lot of closed doors, they made an agreement that they would go and they would do the narration for them. and then they've released it. So I have to tell you guys, I went and I listened to these audiobooks. They have a couple. If you go to Apple and you go to the app and you type in AI audiobooks or AI narration, it'll pull up a list of them. And a couple of them are free. So you can download them, you can listen to the samples, and they are not terrible. They are not perfect. You can certainly hear where there's some robotic kind of conversion in there as it goes from one emotion to the other, but they're decent. I have to be honest and say that I think that this is the beginning of AI narration that really works that way. So we're seeing Apple is now they're accepting submissions to submit your book for AI narration for for audiobooks. And so you're seeing that creep up. And what does that mean for the market? Well, as AI narration, number one, this means that Apple can allow authors and publishers to convert their books for super inexpensive costs, because they're not paying for a voice actor. They're paying for an app, or they're paying for a program that converts their book into an audiobook with AI. And it sounds pretty darn lifelike. So that means publishers and authors are able to very inexpensively go ahead and make audiobooks now. What's that going to mean for the market? Well, I personally think what it's going to mean is kind of what we saw happen with KDP and Kindle, is that when it became really accessible for authors to publish their own ebooks and even their paperbacks, but especially ebooks, when it became very easy for authors to start putting out product, the market became, it's just expanded year over year. Last year, we had over 4 million titles published in a single year. And I think that's what we're going to see in audio, is that as it becomes more accessible with AI narration, which has got so much drama behind it as far as copyright and who has the rights to the art and all sorts of things. And I won't get into that here, but I do think what we'll see is that as these tools become more accessible and more accepted, we're going to see the audiobook kind of flood the market, because what we're seeing is everyone's trying to get a piece of the pie. We're seeing it with iBooks and Spotify. We're seeing it with Apple and Spotify and Audible, where they are all kind of tug of warring to try to get the tech side and the distribution side of the customer market. And I think we're going to see that with authors, because as it becomes more accessible, which overall I think is a good thing, I think we're going to see flooding of the market of people using these AI tools to put up audiobooks, which means there's going to be more for customers to both wade through and choose from, which means it's going to be harder to stand out. So that's not to discourage you, but to say, how many of us have thought, man, I wish I could have gotten on the Kindle trend or the Kindle Unlimited trend when it was new, because those people are doing pretty good right now because they were able to stand out. I think now's that time for audiobooks. I think that if you've been thinking about audiobooks, this year is your chance to create your audiobooks and still really stand out in the market. I think we're going to see some big changes in audio over the next year. Which brings me to my third piece of news, which is Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson is, of course, a very well-known author. He broke the internet last year with his Kickstarter campaign. And he has recently come out very publicly and said his new books, are not going to be distributed through Audible. He believes, and he has very publicly said, that Audible does not pay royalties that are standard in the industry. So typically for audiobook royalties and for digital royalties, for video game sales, for ebooks, typically authors are paid a 70% royalty. But Audible has such a lion's share of the market under their subscription model, and because of Amazon, that they are only paying authors who are exclusive to Audible, which is Audible and iTunes, exclusive on Audible through ACX, a 40% royalty, which is almost half of what's standard. And then if you're not going exclusive with them and you go through a different distributor, they knock that back to 25%. which is almost a third of what is standard in the industry. And Brandon Sanderson was kind of like, hey, you're a good company. You have like so many tools, but this is not cool. And so what he did is he took his titles and he started to shop them around and say, hey, can you give me a good deal? And not only can you give me a good deal, but is this deal going to be open to other authors, which I think is amazing. He's obviously got a nice platform. He has built he's built himself as far as financially being able to put his principles first, which I know some people struggle with. Is I don't want to sell on Amazon. That's where book sells, and I want to make money as an author. Well, Brandon has made it to a point where he is kind of going to bat for authors, which I think is amazing. And what he ended up doing was he ended up going to Spotify and giving Spotify his audiobook distribution rights. And they are giving him a sweet deal, and they are going to be offering that for other authors. So that's something to watch out for as well, is that we kind of think as Amazon as this entity that we cannot, we just can't do much with, because Amazon is this big beast. And like I said, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to sell exclusively through Amazon. And you don't have to, but you have to work harder at it. And a lot of people kind of go back and forth, but Amazon is where customers are at. But as we see bigger names and people with the customer base and the financial backing going elsewhere, I think we're going to see a big disruption in, especially right now, the audiobook market. Because if enough people with a catalog like Brandon's, with a sales base like Brandon's, go and say, no, we're going to buck the system, we're not going to go with Audible, or we're going to fight for better terms for authors, I think that is going to have an amazing impact for authors, especially indie authors. But a little like tidbit for you is these royalty rates that aren't very favorable from Audible, that's not just indie authors. Those are about the same rates that bigger publishers are getting as well. So I think we're going to see kind of, I don't know, I think we're going to see some people really strongly back this, and I think it could change things. I don't know. We're definitely going to see. We saw that when enough people banded together and complained about earlier this year, the ebook returns, how if someone had read past a certain point, they were still returning books. And Amazon eventually changed their policy because of the feedback and honestly the press they were getting on it, the negative press. So we'll have to watch that and see kind of what happens. But that's what's happening in the audiobook. Again, this all has been slowly working up, and I've had my eye on it, but it exploded this week. So we're looking at AI narrated books from Apple. We are looking at Apple kind of shutting Spotify down from in-app purchases. And we are seeing big name authors like Brandon Sanderson bucking the system and trying to make sure that there's not a single player in the publishing market, that being Amazon, and making sure that authors have a fair chance at royalties. So I'll keep you guys updated. This is something that I kind of follow. I read every morning. My husband makes fun of me. Every morning I get up and I get my coffee and I browse through articles and just news, and I check on things. So I'll keep you guys updated as I learn more. And of course, if you come through any interesting news, feel free to just reach out to me, shoot it my way. I love that. And I think it's a good chance right now. Like I said, it's a good chance for authors to get into the audiobook market, but I think it's always going to be good. I think audiobook is definitely being embraced in the future, but I do think that the authors who get into the audiobook market, who are already in it or who get into it in 2023, maybe 2024, are going to be the authors that have the platform and the leverage in the future that everyone really wants to have.